This is a plenary on the topic of the award of the European Microfinance Award of this year, Advancing Financial Inclusion for Refugees and Forcibly Displaced People. We have the panel will be divided in two parts. So in the first part, we will have Patricia interviewing two refugees that came to Europe, and they will tell a bit about their experience. And then we will have a second part with a panel of experts on setting up the scene and starting what will be a series of sessions dedicated to the topic, and that are going to touch on the topic from different angles. It's been a real pleasure for EMFP to work on the award this year. It has been a very rewarding and very exciting year, and we are very pleased to kickstart the stream on the award with this panel. So I'll give the word to Patricia, and then you can start.
Thank you, Joanna. Hello? Yeah, you hear me, yeah? All right. So hi, my name is Patricia Abdelnour, and I think this morning's session is pretty fantastic because we are managing to bring together two groups of people that I think don't usually get together and talk and interact very often. I have been working in social inclusion from many different angles for most of my life. And I think it's very important to have these moments where people like you who are financial inclusion executives and activists get to actually have a real conversation and listen to the people who could be your potential clients and beneficiaries. And whether you are working in a project of social inclusion or financial inclusion, social inclusion through the arts and music, which is what I usually do, or a project of financial inclusion, which is what you do, it's the most important thing to have at the center of the creation of all of these projects or instruments is the beneficiary, the client. And so this is what we are here to share with you today, a little bit of what it's like or the challenges faced by your potential clients and beneficiaries. And for that, I wanted to share just a couple of numbers that probably most of you are familiar with, but I think they're so important that I'm just gonna say them once again. And so we have a fuller picture of what the world looks like today. According to UNHCR, there are currently 117.3 million forcibly displaced people around the world. A little bit, half of them have full recognition status in their country where they are, and a little bit less than half don't, which means they are either in the process of waiting for their recognition, their request of protection to come through, or somewhere in the labyrinth of the process. Either way, it's a lot of people, and a lot of people who could benefit from financial inclusion instruments. I was talking to Rooh right before the session, and he gave me another number that I didn't know and was quite impacted with, which is that it takes an average of 10 years for forcibly displaced people to go back to their level financially, professionally, where they were when they left home. 10 years. I think these are important things to keep in mind. There's another piece of data that I think is very important for everyone in this room to know about, also from UNHCR, and which is the key barriers that they identified, key barriers to financial inclusion for financial providers for refugees and forcibly displaced people. One of them is the context, having or not having an enabling environment. And I have been in some of the talks in this wonderful conference since yesterday, and it's very good news to hear the instruments that are being worked on and created towards the inclusion of refugees and forcibly displaced people. But I think it's also very important that we don't forget the fact that a lot of these people are in an environment where policy is not conducive for them to have access to financial instruments. So these key barriers, enabling or not an enabling environment, lack of conducive policy and regulatory framework conditions. So I think this is really, really important to keep in mind because as I said before, kind of half of the refugees that are around the world are in this situation, have this barrier. Supply, insufficient engagement of financial service providers due to lack of awareness of business case or serving market and misconceptions. So I was talking to someone, he was telling me, well, one of the big misconceptions is that financial providers believe they might leave the place, they might leave anytime. And the statistic of how long people actually stay is pretty long. So I'm not going to delve into that because I think there's other people that are going to talk about that, but that's, I think, a very interesting angle to look at and maybe a stereotype we need to break. And of course, on the demand side, the limited access to supportive non-financial services such as financial education and training. I know that some participants in the conference are coming here with a suitcase of material to be shared on this. This is super important. I work with refugees, so come talk to me afterwards if you're one of them. Well, with that said, I would like to introduce today Manar Zeinaldin and Rooh Savar, whose stories really are an inspiration. I hope this conversation will bring useful insights into the challenges faced by forcibly displaced people, but also, and we were talking about this before, the resilience that people have to have in these 10 years of parcours, of the road that it takes them to get back on their feet, and the amazing potential you have the possibility to unlock for all of them. So with that said, we can start maybe with Manar, or I'm gonna ping pong back and forth a little bit. So Manar, tell us a little bit. I wanted to set a background with both your stories, and you tell us where you come from and tell us how was life back where you came from.
Hello everyone. So my name is Manar. I'm Syrian. Unfortunately, I had to flee my hometown because we had a massacre. I was one away from being not with you today, let's say. And when I came here, like, just to let you know that we had quite similar life as here. So each person, for example, if you're a student, I used to wake up, go to school, get ready, go to school, and then come back home and go visit my family in the weekend. So unfortunately, until the circumstances got really intense and we had an experience that we would never imagine, like we are sitting today, we're having a normal life, and then you have something that you have never imagined in your wildest dream that you have, like you would become an action with directly. So, so that's it. So I would wake up, go to school, and I was studying medicine. And then when I come back home, you know, you have to revise because it's quite intense. And we go out in the evening. I had a close circle of friends.
Yeah. Why did you choose medicine? Where do you come from? Like your parents are doctors? You come from a medical family?
No, actually, my father was a lawyer and my mom was an engineer. But it was in my blood, I think, since I was a child. Like if someone says, I'm sick, okay, you're sick, why? Because for me, I wanted everyone to be in good health and having fun. So I was like, why are you in pain? So it was something that I wanted to do all my life.
And what were your hobbies back home?
So I was into so many things because I liked art as a child. So I liked reading a lot. I was reading Agatha Christie's since I was like 8. My mom would bring me like a book like that, and within 2 days I would be done with it, and then she'd have to go collect another one. And the first story that was published for me, I was like 9 years old. It was published in a newspaper. And I was participating in competitions for like at school, they would organize on a national level competitions for writers. And also I was into kind of like dance, ballet and art. And my mom wanted to put me into music. I liked listening to music, but I tried the violin and the piano and I did not succeed. So yeah, that's it.
Manar and I met, I think, maybe like a month after she got here. And we organized a sortie, an outing to the Grand Théâtre to see a show. And I don't know if you've had the chance to walk around Luxembourg, but Luxembourg is very quiet. And so we walk into the Grand Théâtre, which is a lovely, lovely place. We sit down and Manar looks around and says, "Oh, this is where people are hiding."
It was my first cultural shock because in Syria it's really busy. Like you come because we work. The work days are shorter, so by 2 everyone's done, parents and kids, and then like we go out. Sometimes we go like get lunch, dinner, whatever, and then we go shopping at midnight. Everything's open. So here it's like, oh, I have to really plan when I'm gonna go get my groceries.
So what were your plans back then?
So back then, because the skin is the largest organ, and if you are a good dermatologist who really understands, you can spot so many diseases and you can refer to other specialists. So for me, it was like, I wanted to become a dermatologist, but I could not because of here in Luxembourg, there is a language barrier. So I came here, it was like, I had a C1 level because I was always interested in research as when I was also studying. So you know that to get access to materials, English is the best way, that if you're like, you have this such tool, you can do research on your own. So I was competent in English, but they wanted me to have like C1 in German and French. And I wanted to start immediately because I know the minute I sit and do something else, I'm gonna lose track. So I managed to find a school where I'm studying physiotherapy, and the program is fully in English. So now I'm learning French. I have like a B2 level in French and B1 in German, and we can say A2 in Luxembourgish. So I'm learning languages, but I wanted to get into something in the medical like field. Plus, I'm with like a holistic approach. If I even continued my like medicine studies, I won't be prescribing medicine like the first thing. So I think it suits me well, and I like it. I like what I'm doing now.
Was it hard getting there?
Well, of course, I had like a social worker who was, I believe the intention were good. I believe it was an advice, but I was told, because the first thing I asked, when I will be able to continue my studies, because for me, a life without being active is not an option. So I was like, I really want to start my studies. How can I get access to that? And someone told me, well, since you are alone here without family, without financial support, I think it won't be possible for you to continue your studies. Maybe you go onto like training, you pick up a job and you do training and you find a job. And I was like, I was shocked. I had like, I won't say depressive thought, but I was really sad that day because I thought to myself, I said to them like immediately, I would rather die. Why would I sit here, do something that I'm not passionate about? So fortunately, I managed. I met so many people, so kind people like you, Patricia, who really, like, she gave me inspiration and she was always positive about things. And so I managed to, I had to search. I had some little support, but I went to search. I got my diploma recognized. And then I managed to pass exams, like scientific exam and the language exam, and I got in. Yeah, but I would say the language is something that I had as a plus because so many people, unfortunately, don't have this tool. And then imagine you are in a, like, for example, if I put you in one strange country, like Arab country, where people don't speak any other language, then it will be difficult. You will feel really, there will be a barrier. But here, because I had the language, it was, I would say a facilitator for me to get in.
Yeah, Manar, I think, Manar is here today with us to tell us of her story, because what she doesn't say is that all of that you've heard is basically impossible. She made the impossible happen. And how did she do that? Yes, of course, the language helped, her background helped, but also it was navigating a blocked road not on an enabling policy environment that allowed her to get to the financial resources that connected her to a path to going back to higher education. But this is a very complicated path.
Even when I got in, I had a social worker who just told me, who do you think you are? You won't be able to manage that. You need a place, you need to finance yourself, and you need to finance your studies. And I would think that it won't work. And we need to organize a meeting. So I left the office. I said to the other person, please, I want nothing to do with this person again. I'm gonna manage it. And it happened, but it was quite intense, and I was shaking in the office because after I got into this thing, I have a person trying to convince me that no, it won't work. So many people tried and did not work. So it's true.
Yeah.
But maybe I built in a habit where I ignore this negative speech and I don't even consider it as we're talking, but it's true that it's not easy.
Well, let's dream big. Let's aim at the impossible, right? Rooh, tell us a little bit about your story and a little bit about your journey and how you got here.
I come from Iran. Back there, I was journalist and entrepreneur. I was also involved in the democratic movement against the regime, especially against back there in 2009, the very hardline President Ahmadinejad, and I was a leader of student movement there. And because of my activity, I was arrested several times. I spent a couple of months in prison, and I had the chance, a really quick window to leave the country. I spent a couple of months in Turkey by miracle. I had this opportunity to come to France. I had two choice, two proposition from the United States and French embassy in Istanbul, and I had just 24 hours to decide, and I chose France. And I was in Paris just 1 week later, which is exactly in November 2009, 16 years ago. And yeah, the same path as you. You arrive, whatever your background, you don't know the language, so you have to manage to learn. And almost everybody tell you that your dreams aren't possible. Everything is complicated here, and I wanted to continue my professional path and my develop it, even go farther. But at the beginning, it was very difficult. I believe for 5 years, I was in a kind of really blurry area. I didn't have a clear perspective. I was journalist. I was working with at the beginning with the Persian media, and afterwards I started to working with international medias, and I learned French, and the French language is not an easy language, especially when you are a journalist, and it's your work tool, and you need to be sometimes even better than French-speaking people to write and to express yourself. But someday I told myself, okay, in 6 months I will be able to give a live speech or debate in a French television. So I couldn't make it in 6 months, but in 3 years I was able to do so, and my last achievement as a journalist for French media was interviewing François Hollande in his last days and sad days in Élysée Palace of French presidency. And after this experience, I decided to create my own media in France, specializing in Iran and in the Middle East affairs. And actually, by starting my own entrepreneurship path, I started to see things clearly, have a vision for myself, and to be able to drive my own destiny. And I can say, between 2020, 2015, 2017, it was a crucial moment of my life to start a new path of entrepreneurship in media at the beginning, and later on in a fintech.
Yeah, so that's where I want to go now, because to me, it's very impressive that, you jumped and said, okay, I'm going to do things. I'm going to take this by, my own hands. I'm going to solve this problem. But not only the journalist's dream, but then you went above and above and above. And so I want you to talk about your two other projects.
Yeah, actually, when I start my entrepreneurship journey and adventures, some friends told me there is a new NGO that started to support refugee entrepreneurs. And you can go and see them. At the beginning, I said no. NGOs that are working with refugees, I love them, but I don't want to be in touch with them because in a majority of time, there's two different types. You have urgency needs, and we need them, and they helped me a lot when I arrived in France. But when you pass this urgent situation, normally, NGOs or local organization aren't. They don't push you to go further. Exactly, I have a lot of same experience as you, but they told me no, it's different. So and they offer you a free office in the center of Paris. Okay, I told them, okay, let's try. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an opportunist, and when I went there, the first question is, hi, Rooh, how are you doing? How can you help us? And it was the first time that I had this approach. Okay, I can help other people. And I started to be involved as a volunteer in this very young NGO, which is a Singa. 3 years later, they asked me to join the board. And at the beginning, I told them, no, I don't want to create a career in immigration and refugee. I'm journalist, I'm an entrepreneur. And when they insisted, I told myself, okay, these are very smart people and they think I can help them. So let's do it. And since 2018, I became the president of this NGO that help refugees and newcomers in their entrepreneurship and professional pathway. And today, when I joined the organization, it was the only entrepreneurship program in Paris, and the first one. Today, we are in almost 20 cities in France and in Canada.
And Luxembourg?
And Luxembourg, especially in Germany, in Spain, in Belgium, we have entrepreneurship program. We have, and one of my achievement in Singa is to run a special program to support refugee journalists. The things that I didn't have when I came to France, and today I'm very happy that we started our first batch of journalists, entrepreneur, refugee, and I put refugee at the end of the word because at the beginning people are student, journalists, researchers, workers, father, mother, and being a refugee is, yeah, it's a part of life, and normally it's become behind you. And after, especially after the war in Ukraine, 4 days after the war, we decided to create a fintech to help, because we had a lot of wave of immigration and especially refugees in Europe, after Syria, after Iran in 2009, after Afghanistan and Ukraine, and I thought, okay, it's not possible that we have the same problem, and especially in Europe, if you don't have a bank account, you don't have a social and economic life. And so we started first quickly by the support of Visa, which is one of my partner in Singa. We started a first program to a direct cash help to Ukrainian refugee and other refugees in France. Letting some NGOs, especially the Red Cross, to distribute the direct aid to refugees. And I'm happy to say that today, again with Visa, we developed a international program that we can let international organizations to offer the direct aids to refugees just by this card, which is welcome account, and people can receive the aid directly. But welcome account became farther than just a card program. Today it's a neobank and an HR tech. So we help NGOs and companies that support and hire newcomers, immigrant workers, and refugees. So we are B2B2C. That means we work with these organizations. They present us their communities, and we open a bank account for them.
Which is such a big deal.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I don't know if some of you were in the session, we had Patrick. He's a refugee that came from Uganda, maybe like a year and a half ago, also created the miracle of being able to go to school here. And Patrick's really funny. He said one of the challenges that he has here is that he's unable to send money home.
Yeah.
And not only because it's expensive, but because it's not possible. He said, the minute innocently, I said, well, but the Post offers actually, and they don't even charge, you might want to check it out. So he went to Post, where he has a bank account opened by the government. And he said, the minute I took out my pink paper, the refugee status paper, it was like taking out a criminal record. I mean, all doors closed. Yeah. So and he was explaining yesterday that, you need an address, and the address that he has is the address of the foyer, the refuge camp. And that's not good enough. No. And so this is a huge deal.
Yeah, actually, legally is possible, but because our kind of profile doesn't match the typical profile of banks clients. So they say, okay, it's not possible, and bye. And while this is in almost every European countries, it's a right. Having a bank account, it's a right. And so legally, we are really backed by the public governments. So we actually, I wasn't supposed to be in this place. My destiny wasn't to become a banker today, but it was my path. I went through all of this struggle, but several people around me, and I had this chance to be supported by good people, but very committed organization. And I have to thank Visa, Microsoft, and Crédit Agricole that supported us to launch this organization.
Amazing project.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rooh. Well, Manar, one last question for you. How do you see yourself now? How do you see the future?
Well, actually, a detail that I forgot to mention again. So I've been here only for 3 years, and I'm in the end of my second year. So everyone who asks me, which year are you in? And I say the second year, how long have you been here? 3 years. They're like, okay, wow. So everything is going well for me. And because I see that, also I have a student job in administration, and I liked always administration because I was just following my father. I was like, do you have anything on the computer that I can help with, like files, Excels, whatever? So I'm doing these two things now. And for the future, I think because we are the place that we have access to knowledge, and we should not be worrying about just treating people. We should start thinking about prevention. So I would like to get into research. I would like a PhD again. And I would like to also stay in contact, find like a work, study, life balance where I can stay in a clinical field with patients daily to just keep the passion, because everything has to be like the human life is what matters most for me, and as it should to everyone else. So I would like to keep it centered to have like a work in the clinic while also doing some research.
Thank you, Manar. Well, I think with these very inspiring words, I hope you take them home as I'm going to take them home. It fills my heart to hear that, dreams not only can come true, but actually can be reborn, no? So thank you very much, both of you. I hope these are useful insights that inspire the products that you guys
Thank you all
will be
for
developing.
listening also.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Patricia. Sorry. Now, after this inspiring conversation, we will need a few moments just to mic up the next speakers. So, and start the panel. But as you can see, we'll have a wide panel with distinguished experts in the topic.
Good to go? Okay. I'm going to check if it's working. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for staying in the room and for waiting for our panelists to get on the stage. I have the honor of moderating this wonderful panel that I will introduce very shortly. First, I really would like to thank you for coming today and sharing your stories. This was a very inspiring way to start this discussion. Before we deep dive into the discussion, I would like to ask you all to use your imagination just a little bit. I want you to imagine a young man who comes from the Democratic Republic of Congo and at the age of 12 had to leave his country to escape violence. So at the age of 12 only, he found himself in a refugee camp in Kenya. This young man is called Sebastian, and Sebastian, after a very long process, was finally granted asylum, which means that he was recognized as a refugee. He relies on humanitarian help and gets a bit of cash, which he uses for himself as well as for his dad and his uncle, who also live with him in Kenya. Then I would like you to imagine a woman called Rama. Rama comes from a very small village in a rural area, but she was forced to leave her village after a natural catastrophe. So then she resettled in a big city and she now lives in an urban neighborhood. But before leaving her village, Rama was actually a welder, and her dream was to set up her own business and to help other women make it into this industry. Because Rama left her village but did not cross any international border, she is what we call an IDP, an internal displaced person. So Sebastian and Rama are both forcibly displaced people, among many others, and their stories might be different, but what they also have in common is that they have the same goal. Just like you guys, they also want to make it in their new country or new place. They want to be able to pursue a career, to set up a business, to take care of themselves, of their families, without having to rely on humanitarian support forever. And so I want you to remember Sebastian and Rama's stories because we will use them to guide us through our discussion today. And now I would like to first introduce our first panel member, Micol Pistelli. I'm sure many people in the room actually know Micol, but she is the Senior Financial Inclusion Officer, I didn't want to miss this word, at the UNHCR, which means that she is the focal point for promoting initiatives that enable forcibly displaced people to have access to formal financial services. So I know that we touched a bit upon this already, but could you please help us set up the context so that we can understand what is at stake here and so that we can see how the stories of Sebastian and Rama, among many others, illustrate the context for forcibly displaced people, especially regarding financial inclusion.
With pleasure. Thank you, Daria, and good morning, everyone. So this is a nice segue to the previous panel where we heard really amazing stories coming from Rooh and Manar, sorry, because this is exactly the type of life that the two fictional characters that you portrayed are aspiring to have. So very different background, living in different contexts. One is an internally displaced person, meaning she didn't have to leave the borders of her country, but she was still forcibly displaced, so she had to find refuge in another part of their country. And then another person, a refugee, so he had to leave DRC to seek refuge in Kenya. So different background, different aspirations seem still a common hope, a common goal, which is the one that the wonderful panelists before they were saying, very resilient. They want to succeed, want to be an entrepreneur, another not, another probably is looking for employment. So I would say that these are very real characters because they resemble the over, and Patricia, I'm going to correct your figures because working with UNHCR, unfortunately, we are always updating them. And now we're actually reached over 123 million of forcibly displaced. A very important thing before going to your the second part of your question, what financial service providers can do for them. This is not a monolith. These are internally displaced persons that correspond to the majority of the figures, over 73 million forcibly displaced. And you might probably not know who are the biggest currently IDP crisis in the world, which is Sudan. It is one of the crises. This is not often in the news. There are over 10.7 million of Sudanese forcibly displaced, and then the Ukrainians and the others. Refugees, over 43 million, including the Palestinians, which is growing. Refugees numbers have tripled over the past 10 years. And the reasons why they're leaving, and then there are the stateless, and there are the asylum seekers, and then there are the mixed protracted situation like the Venezuelans, is mixed flows. Why are they leaving? They are escaping from war for persecution, but also from climate change related hazards. And this is important to all of us here because the financial community is now having a very strong interest into the climate lens. Let's think at the refugee climate related lens because it's going to grow. Imagine that 3 over 4 people currently forcibly displaced, they live in countries with a high or extreme weather-related risk. And this compounds to the fragility of their setting. This is to set the scene. A second figure I wanted to provide is the number of years people are in exile. Patricia was touching upon that. I'm going to give the figure. The World Bank recently published it. Is 13 years. So 13 years of exile, of missed opportunities in terms of education, in terms of employment. This also means what? An opportunity for all of us working in the financial sector, because it means it's a protracted situation. It's not people leaving anytime soon. These are people that are going to stay because they would probably like, most of them, to return safely in their country. It's not possible. So they're going to stay in a protracted situation. And the very majority of them, again, contrary to the stigma that we often have, don't come to Europe or to the Western world. 71% of them stay in low and middle income countries, the vast majority in the neighboring countries. So they're not really come here. They usually tend to stay there. So when you have to think about a market for you to to serve in terms of financial services, this is the market. It is a very varied group, and so the very first thing to do is to be able to segment such markets. Let's not treat them as a monolith. Let's instead use the data that we are collecting, socioeconomic profile and market insight, to really come up with a tailored approach, market-based approach, but not with the refugee type of product. I loved what Rooh was saying before. None of the refugees like to present themselves, hello, I am Maria and I am a refugee. They like to say, I am Maria and I am an entrepreneur and I am a student. And I also happen to be a refugee. Hopefully, this is going to be temporary condition. So when we think about serving this market, let's really think about how we in the microfinance sector, in the financial inclusion sector, have been serving the low-income countries, the low-income people, how we're applying a gender lens. Let's apply a refugee lens. We don't need to come up with a new product. It's just adapting based on market insight, based on specific context. And I will stop here.
Thank you, Micol. Indeed, we see that FDPs are not a homogeneous group. They all have different paths, different objectives, and different skills that they can contribute to their local communities and economies. And again, your example demonstrate that. I would like now to think again about Sebastian and Rama when I turn to our second panel member, Suzanne. Suzanne Valkenbom is with the World Food Programme, WFP. She serves as the Deputy Global Team Lead, focusing on digital financial inclusion and women economic empowerment. So Suzanne, can you share with us how does the WFP as a humanitarian organization provide the first line of service for FDPs so that we can a bit understand what kind of assistance can Sebastian and Rama hope to receive?
Yes, good morning, everyone. So humanitarian organizations like the World Food Programme, but also like UNHCR, provide support on the front line where financial service providers, the private sector, are not immediately present. And the important thing to note here is that we do that at scale. So for the World Food Programme, for example, we transfer $3.3 billion to 57 million people across the world annually. And we help governments as well with their social assistance payments. And especially when we do that on people's own financial accounts, this can be, a big opportunity to onboard people into a financial ecosystem. We also provide access to other financial services, not directly, but through partners in terms of insurance, savings, and loans. And what is it to the private sector? Well, we do the reconnaissance work in a way. We have a wide field presence. We talk to the communities on a daily basis. We try to understand their financial needs, their preferences, what works for them, and also more the factors that affect their financial behavior, whether those are religious or cultural, their financial literacy rate, capabilities, but also if they understand insurance products, and the events that trigger any payout. So the reconnaissance work is one, but also, of course, providing a comprehensive support, which includes basic literacy, financial literacy, digital literacy, but also vocational training, for example, to increase income support opportunities. And with that support, we arguably contribute to lowering the barriers to market entry for the private sector. Whether that's also, infrastructurally related, whereas there's maybe limited connectivity, we provide incentives to build that infrastructure. And, if there's a good service provision, these people that we're providing services to can be good brand ambassadors. They can recommend to others. So there's definitely a case there to be made from a private sector angle. And finally, also not to undermine the advocacy that we do as humanitarian practitioners, but also with our partners, including financial service providers, into enabling the regulations and national regulatory environment to be more adapted to people who face, your customer limitations.
Thank you, Suzanne. And yes, what we see on the field is that this first line of service that is provided can actually serve as a first entry point to then build up on the financial inclusion of refugees and other forcibly displaced populations. I will now introduce our third panel member, Craig Churchill. And some of you might actually remember Craig from last year because he was seated here moderating a panel. But this year, Craig has been called back to share his expertise because he currently leads the social finance program at the International Labour Organization, the ILO, which explores ways in which financial actors can actually help to the proliferation of decent work. So, Craig, good morning. Can you please share with us how does the ILO support financial service providers who want to engage with refugees and other displaced populations? And I know it's a large question to cover in a short amount of time, but how can we promote an inclusive financial ecosystem?
Thanks, Daria. So good morning, everyone. At the ILO, we're currently working with 9 financial service providers across 7 countries, and who are targeting refugees, forcibly displaced persons, and the approach that we take is really sort of 3 entry points. One is at the macro level, really thinking about the environment and allowing people, getting governments to recognize them as potential customers. So the KYC issue is certainly a key one that Suzanne just mentioned. So that's sort of the initial level. And then on the demand side, really thinking about how to build the capacity of prospective customers on financial education, entrepreneurship, sort of the understanding how to access and utilize financial services more effectively. And then on the supply side, this is sort of the part that's really interesting, is sort of getting financial institutions to think about this market opportunity and to understand how they can serve forcibly displaced persons, refugees more effectively. So we have a training program to sort of orient them around this market opportunity and to think about how they can adapt and engage with this market segment, and then providing ongoing technical assistance so that they can develop relevant products and services. But as Micol mentioned, it's not really necessarily developing new products. It's really adapting what they have to be able to be relevant for this target group. One of the examples would be, in terms of delivery, who should be the sort of the loan officer. So hiring people from the refugee community to be able to be the loan officers is a sort of a easy solution. It's a better solution than having somebody from outside, or making sure that the materials that you have are in the right languages for the refugee community. Hearing the language challenge from the previous panel is an ongoing one. So it's really thinking through and segmenting the market and understanding what sort of services need to be provided, and recognizing that we're not going to be starting with loans, right? We're going to be starting with probably payment services, as came up in the previous panel as well. And that's really the right entry point from a financial inclusion perspective, being able to open up savings account and maybe eventually thinking about if there is a entrepreneurship opportunity, then the loans could jump in at that stage.
Thank you, Craig. So we see that there is a market-making opportunity with financial service actors, with refugees and their host communities, as well as regulators who also have an important role to play. But the good news is there is technical support that is already available so that you don't have to start from scratch. And building up on this idea of a financial ecosystem, I would like now to turn back to Micol. Micol, based on your experience, what are some of the key elements for successful partnership between humanitarian actors, development actors, and private sector to effectively advance financial inclusion of displaced people and their host communities?
Yes, so a couple of partners are here, the IFC and the ILO. We've been working closely with IFC on a joint initiative where we are leveraging our respective expertise, the one of the humanitarian agency of UNHCR and the one of the private sector of the IFC, to really doing a joint assessment, providing market intelligence. Back to what I was mentioning before, the data is key to provide the contextualized approaches in every country. And so we're very happy of this partnership, as it has allowed us to provide a lot of market intelligence that we didn't have, as usually UNHCR collects socioeconomic profile type of data, but doesn't go deep into the market. And that's the complementary role of the IFC, of course, in addition to their financing role. With the ILO, we have a partnership when it comes to the non-financial services that Craig was mentioning. But in terms really of key components, I would say, first of all, the physical presence in the ground. UNHCR, WFP, other humanitarian agencies, NGO, grassroots we partner with, have the knowledge and the capacity and the ability to support the financial service provider investors to come in and to establish point of services. You can leverage existing networks to do that, we can provide the data and the logistic support to enter in the settlements. We have a comparative advantage also in terms of technical expertise. When they want to come and provide, for example, digital financial solution, you need to have a functioning network in the area. You need to understand what are the legal barriers that were touched upon in the previous panel, and how we can adapt the product to be sure that the recognized refugees ID is indeed accepted by a financial service provider. And then, of course, financing, the big gap. What type of financing? I know there is going to be a very interesting session after this talking about the guarantees. So I'm not going to touch upon that, the role of guarantees or not guarantees, the risking mechanism, but for sure, blended finance, the buzzword that we keep using, what does it mean? Is public, private sector, capital expertise coming together to provide the risking mechanism, liquidity, but in a way that is truly understanding the refugee market. So we always say we should make FSPs refugee ready. What does it mean? They have to understand what are the specific barriers, and then we can come up with market-friendly incentives that, in our experience at UNHCR, and I know that Philippe of Grameen Critical Foundation is going to touch upon this in the next session, we've seen that usually the best incentives happen to be lowering the operational cost of FSPs when they have to go in an areas where there is no presence of financial service providers to attend to the refugees, so covering part of the operational cost essentially, but also market insights and market intelligence and sometimes the risk mechanism. We are also at the point of scaling. We have been doing so many pilots, we have so many data, we have so many small projects, we need to scale. What does it need to scale? So certainly, again, your role here, liquidity, the role of the funders, technical assistance and such. And then I would also say the important component of we are a very powerful community if we come together and we work to lobby with the government to change those non-enabling environment that we were saying before. So to give a figure, 57% of refugees live in countries where their refugee ID or the government issue ID is recognized as a legal valid document to open an account. That doesn't mean that it happens in practice. And in the other countries, when the environment is not enabling, we have the power to come together and change the legislation. We did that in Zambia, we did that in Uganda, it's possible to do. But it's better if instead of UNHCR going solo, UNHCR goes there with the financial sector, with banks, with investors, with IFC. It makes a lot of difference. So really the solution is coming together. And then finally, one of the finalists of this award is Al-Majmoua. Al-Majmoua has taught all of us really how to do microfinance for refugees because they are a pioneer. Al-Majmoua is operating one of the most non-enabling environment, Lebanon, where refugees, Palestinians, Syrians have very little rights actually to access the labor market. Still, they were able to succeed. If Al-Majmoua could do that, imagine what you can do in an enabling environment.
Thank you, Micol, for sharing all of these examples. Look at that. That's powerful statements that has received a lot of great feedback. And you've shared quite a few examples to be able to scale the interventions, and that is necessary to make sure that all of the work that we are doing in this room can actually expand to another level. I will now introduce our fourth panelist that you know very well because you work with him, Ricardo Garcia Tafur, who is working on the IFC UNHCR joint initiative and who is also specialized in financial inclusion, but also serving underserved populations, including FDPs, among others. So we see, Ricardo, from the discussion since yesterday, actually, that access to the first line of basic financial services is the first step towards bigger financial inclusion. And yet, refugees and other displaced populations have difficulties accessing these services. What are some of the myths from FSPs that still exist, and how do you respond to them?
Thank you. Thank you, Anna. And I think I will also congratulate you now, the previous panelists. It was very inspiring. And I think, first of all, I will say that everybody here in this room can be displaced if our circumstances in life can change. So that said, we have to demystify, the existing risk perception about populations, like actually basically look for better opportunities. So this is the work that we need to do. We have been hearing buzzwords like the business opportunity, the market, but how can we translate that into something that is palatable for institutions like yours, investors, financial institutions, to understand better what is the market opportunity? So we have been conducting what we call financial inclusion gap assessments for forcibly displaced people in IFC in different countries. Basically, we started in countries in which there is more enabling environment, in which there is free mobility, because as Micol can actually add more, there are situations in which people are basically circumscribed to be in a refugee camp. In others, they can have free mobility, like here we have seen the example that you presented. So we're trying to actually present how we can advance financial inclusion, even in the countries in which there is no restriction on mobility, even it's actually difficult. How can we start convincing and actually incentivizing financial institutions to actually understand better these market segments? So segmentation is first, because it's not a monolithic group of people. Basically, there are different groups, and actually we try to segment based on the migration journey. The relocation journey, as has been explained before, is actually very key to understand. So then the second is about to what extent there is economic or financial autonomy or financial independence. So people that have access actually to economic opportunities, to livelihoods. So we divide different kind of groups in terms of the phase of reallocation. We call it insertion in the first phase, then we call it stabilization, and then we call it integration in the last phase, okay? So that actually, is much easier for institutions to understand. But at the same time, whenever we present that kind of information, we also try to match, what kind of segment is actually more interesting for what kind of institution. Because people that are actually arriving, as you mentioned, I think, Rooh, at the first stage, they will need assistance from WFP, from UNHCR, of course, and then, fintech like yours can actually help on that kind of issuing of cash assistance, right? But later on, you mentioned also, I'm stable, I need more. So how can I graduate from the cash assistance to become a customer of financial institutions that can provide me loans, remittances, insurance, and savings, more important savings. So in information that we have been collecting also to demystify this, most of the people want to have access to a saving account, because it's the way that they actually can secure the deposits, can secure their only assets that they may have, right? In a place that is safe, but also can give them opportunity for being known about the financial institutions as their profile for later on to be considered for other products and services. So we identify the gap between the demand and the supply. We actually identify what are the typical needs from different kind of segments, and then we monetize that. We establish what is the revenue that institutions are losing if they are not tapping that kind of market. So that information is something that institutions can understand. But at the same time, in the same assessments, we also need to assess what is the readiness of the financial institutions. Micol actually touched base on that. Many of the institutions are not ready. And we can talk about any kind of investment instruments. If the institutions don't have the business model in place, the operational model in place, they can fail, right? So we need to actually provide more information to get them closer to the market, demystifying this kind of risk perception, because risk is basically, if I don't know you, how can I lend you money, right? I need to have more information about you so I can understand how can I, assess how much you can pay me and when. So that kind of information is needed. Sometimes it's needed previous to the investment. We need to understand that. So institutions need to be ready for that. We in IFC also provide advisory services besides the investment services that we provide. Like you are actually, engaging with financial institutions for them to have a business model in place, which is adapted, tailored to the needs of this population. But for that, we need to establish what are the archetypes? What is the story of Rooh? What is the story of Manar? What kind of needs you have, right? The institutions need to actually digest that and actually implement something that is meaningful for them. It's a human-centric approach. So, but for that, we can discuss later on how we can actually make that happen into the financial institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very straightforward business case, which I'm sure resonated with the room here as well as online. But to make things even more concrete, I would like to introduce our last, but certainly not least, panel member, Diana Salume. Diana is a Senior Program Associate for Refugee Financial Inclusion at the Opportunity Bank Uganda Limited, OBOL. And OBUL, since 2019, has actually served refugee communities. Can you please share your experience? And what I would really be interested in hearing is what actually drove OBUL to open up to this market.
Thank you so much, Daria. Very interesting journey that Opportunity Bank started in 2019, as you said. And we met people with very interesting quotations, just as it's seen into the presentation up there. So we had a human-centered design just to understand their needs, as people said, the previous speakers. But what is so unique about the refugee segment is the three different segments. There are those that are very dependent. Those are the first arrivals or the new arrivals that come into the settlement. Their needs are unique. Then there are those that are subsistence or that are already into groups and they're saving. Then we have those that are very independent, that actually married each other or married Ugandans in the refugee settlement. So through our human-centered design in Opportunity Bank, we designed specific products that would meet the needs of these refugees. As the previous speaker said, we realized that refugees were saving, but in groups. They were saving, but on their mobile phones. But they had fear to bring the money into their accounts. So we had to come up with a specific account for refugees, but also make it ledger-free so that we can encourage them to save. So we had accounts for them open, but also we had refugee loans because refugees that were subsistence and the independent ones were already in VSLAs, which are the village savings and loans groups. But most of them were loaning to themselves at 10%. So as a bank, we began giving them loans at 2%. So there was a business case for them. We said, come take a loan from the bank at 2% and lend out to your group members at 10%. And the difference you make there, 8%, is profit for the VSLA. So the bank, through the journey in 2019, we realized we needed to also tailor financial literacy curriculum, but hire the locals. We brought refugees that we work with in the settlement. We hired them. It's in the local language. So to help them on the mindset change, to understand that you don't need to be dependent, but you're here to grow yourself and become more resilient in the settlement. And this also helped us to build our curriculum and trust and work with them easily. And in 2021, we opened physical presence in the settlement. It's very much easy when you talk to people and there's a fully fledged bank there, there's an ATM, because initially when we went into the refugee settlement, they used to have one person go over 50 kilometers to withdraw money for members of a group. So we constructed a branch to able to serve the woman here who has now got a loan and she's able to hire someone into her business. And these amazing stories that we as Opportunity Bank are proud to share with you, that it's very easy and refugees are very bankable. Thank you.
Thank you. And congratulations for all of these achievements in a short amount of time. But I do imagine that the journey was not easy and you must have faced obviously a few challenges. Could you share some of them and what were the solutions and what worked?
Nice. So our challenges were not different from the refugee experiences that our colleagues shared. So the mobility nature of refugees is very disturbing in the banking sector. How? Because refugees can move from the settlement to the urban places, that is our capital city in Kampala, to other different refugee areas they can go to. So when you disperse a loan, it's very difficult for you to track that refugee if they've left the settlement, Nakivale, for example, to the Kampala area, but also repatriation if the humanitarian agencies, and we work with partners that, yes, they move the refugees from one place to another or to another country. It's very difficult for us to track them. And then we also have low digital literacy of refugees. We want them to be well equipped with using the mobile phones, with using ATMs, but we're still facing a challenge to reach all of them. And we're still facing some refugees also have high dependency syndrome. So the mindset change is really a journey that we're walking with them. It's not easy, but we know time and again, as we're here with other partners, and we hope we shall walk through this journey with the refugees. And our lessons learned is a continuous partnership, our partnership with Opportunity International that really greatly supports Opportunity Bank in the work that we do. We also have linkages from organizations like WFP that have VSLAs that link to the bank, has really given us more clarity in the work that we're doing. And I think most of the partners should be physically present to see that you reach the people and serve them better. Yeah,
Thank you, Diana. And I think what really transpires through your experience and what has already been mentioned earlier is this human-centered approach. And I would like to turn to Suzanne to hear a bit more about this approach and if and how it translates into WFP's approach and engagement with displaced populations.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the panel has a couple of times underlined the need for people, for us to talk to the people that we're trying to help, right? So that is the key message, and I think it's been driven home. But it's not just talking to people, it's also having the guts and the willingness to challenge your own systems and processes, which is hard, a hard pill to swallow sometimes, just because you have a different perspective, because you've listened. So a very small example of that is in context where there is no financial service provider, WFP, other agencies sometimes use this prepaid card. And on that card, we had the validity date of the card, for us, very obvious. But when we talked to the people that we were trying to help, they said, well, we understood that date to be the amount of time that we were going to be assisted for. I mean, that was 3 or 4 years, and we could not make that promise, right? So a very concrete example of how we had to change our thinking and perspective. But how do we do that at the moment at a very large scale? It's by challenging, again, our processes and systems, whereas WFP normally contracts 1 or 2 financial service providers in a particular context for an operation or a particular operation, we now provide people choice in how they wish to receive their assistance, through what modality, but also through what account. So we don't set up parallel accounts. You know, why don't we use the one that's already being used by someone? Yeah, that's definitely a better way to help people. And yeah, that is just, you know, flipping the power imbalance as well, and you know, triggering competition in the market. So now we work with aggregators, and in a context we don't have 2 financial service providers, but we have a variety of different financial service providers. So yeah, that's what we try to do to really, you know, put action where our words are in terms of this empowering and dignifying journey. And lastly, of course, I have to underline the protection issues that these vulnerable communities face. Often, of course, people on the move, the vulnerabilities are exacerbated. I think that's pretty obvious. But what does that mean for us? It really means, you know, thinking through sensitization, how you communicate to people, in what language, what do people understand? Again, the literacy building, but also talking to agent networks, right, on the private sector side to limit the risks of abuse of power. And yeah, that's really what we're very focused on.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. And actually, the protection part is especially important because, as you've mentioned, forced displacement exacerbates vulnerabilities that were already there in the first place before the displacement. And I'm going to turn now to Craig, because one idea would be that social protection can be an example of how to promote inclusion. So in your experience, how can financial inclusion contribute to the larger inclusion? If we go back to Sebastian and Rama, how can their financial inclusion can help them settle for a long time, because they're not expected to leave anytime soon in their new communities?
Yeah, so thanks. I guess one way of looking at it is similar to, I guess, the graduation model that started by BRAC and has been promoted in a lot of other places. And recognizing that people at different stages in their life, or in this case, stages in their refugee status, have different needs. So just the way you described the different categories of clients that you're serving. And so we really do need to think about how do we, in order to promote this economic and social integration of refugees, how do we help facilitate them through those stages more quickly? So hearing the 10-year cycle before, you know, is that really something we should be aspiring toward, or can we accelerate that integration timelines? So I do think it's really important that we think about designing the right services at the right time, but also moving the target groups more rapidly through that cycle so that we can get them better economically and socially integrated.
Thank you very much, Craig. Before we open up the floor, one last question to Ricardo. I hope that we have in this room and online, and maybe in the future, financial service providers who are interested in supporting refugees and other forcibly displaced populations. What would be your key recommendations for them to take away from this session after what we've already talked about?
In our experience has been critical to have the leadership engaged, basically the leaders, the C-suite, the CEOs engaged with this agenda. It can happen, and has been happening somehow from the sustainability point of view. So trying institutions that are trying to reach, environmental, social, and governance standards, some of them are actually introducing diversity, equity, and inclusion, but moreover, it's important that they can actually start with that as a pilot, but then moving this as a core business. Yesterday was a panel with an insurance company. Actually, when I spoke with AXA, they say, this is part of our core business. So that's actually critical. But I mean, as Micol actually presented, we don't need to invent the wheel. We have been doing microfinance for years. We have been working with institutions that target informal people, informal sector, low-income people, people that don't have access perhaps to identity, etc., people that don't have information to present to the institution in order to underwrite risk, force us actually to go to the field and actually collect that information directly, right? So those models exist, and in many cases has been also built up on internally displacement. So we have not been talking about that actually, but many of the experiences, and I coming from Latin America, actually on microfinance started with internally displaced people that actually moved to the urban centers, right? So start actually establishing in the periphery of urban centers, and microfinance institutions have been actually growing with that experience, growing with that path. So I will say that that's critical. The second one, we have been talking about biases. We have been talking about demystifying risk. It's about that. So we need to actually reduce, mitigate at least the bias and the stereotypes. Actually being somebody being called refugee is also, it's part of our agenda also to change. Some countries have been changing, let's say, foreign-born resident. That includes, for you financial institutions, a larger market opportunity. You can focus on migrants, refugees, asylum seekers, etc. And moreover, to vulnerable populations that are also local. LGBT communities, people with different abilities, Afro-descendants in some countries in Latin America, indigenous communities, etc. So we can approach that, and we have been learning a lot on gender. So that's something that actually we need to probably leverage as well, because we are looking at women, something that, in a different way that we can serve, tailor-made, etc. This is something that you can leverage also for refugees, for migrants, etc. So, and last, I think, and this platform actually bring us the possibility is to mainstream this concept. We have been talking a lot about climate finance. We have been talking about gender, but what about talking about this more, because it's not an ending situation. 124 million right now. We don't know what exactly is happening tomorrow. So I will say that great opportunity. Let's still, keep talking about this, but in a way that is very pragmatic, very business oriented, and something that can be sustainable in the future for everybody.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Before we open up the floor for one or two questions, because it's lunch break and people are hungry and we have a long day ahead, for your information and to finish on a lighter note, Sebastian and Rama are actually real persons that were supported by the International Rescue Committee. Sebastian is now a data analyst in one of the top firms in Nairobi, and Rama has found a job. She's not opening up her own business, but she's saving to do so. Another point is that if you're interested in pursuing the discussion of financial inclusion of FDPs, we actually have a community of practice dedicated to this specific topic. Some of the members are on the stage. Some of the members are in the room, and we met this morning. I'm not going to get into the details now, but if you're interested, please come and talk to me directly or online. We have an exciting plan for 2025, and we will be happy to join to have new members join us, including financial service providers. But enough from my side. First of all, please, a first big round of applause for our experts. And can we take one question from the floor?
More than one.
If there is, otherwise lunch break. Oh, well, one. There will be many, I know.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for the very good presentations, very useful. I have a question perhaps to Ricardo from IFC. So it was very interesting to listen this and make some comparisons with how to convince financial institutions to extend financial services for Roma, for example, in Europe, because I think the Roma community faces the same challenges as displaced people, the stigma of constantly being on the move and not having collateral, not having identity papers. So it's interesting to hear about the experience of the IFS providing advisory services. And I understand the importance of convincing the leadership of financial institutions. I have experience when the leadership has been pretty much supportive of opening the organization to provide loans to the Roma, but then the middle management was against and many deals fell through. So I was wondering if you could share some experience of what worked. What are some from the practices that your organizations have implemented? Because changing minds, changing stereotypes also takes years. Thank you.
You are totally right. I mean, the easiest part is to change the process, to change the procedure, to ask your software vendor to change something in the core banking system, to add the different kind of documents that are in hands of Forcibly-based people. Yeah, that's part. It's easy. To convince the people, and actually you pointed something very clear. It's not just only the C-suite that needs to be convinced. They probably would like to be around us in these kind of platforms and talking about this agenda. When they go back home, they have to convince all the different, because institutions are made by people anyway. So it's more even difficult when you have credit officers that are biased, that they actually see refugees as, riskier kind of segments. And actually, if the refugees default in their loans, immediately they spread the voice and say, it's bad to provide loans to refugees. And that happens. And sometimes also, we are going to talk about guarantees later on, but in some cases, guarantees may have that kind of effect because, institutions relax their underwriting policies. But what you say is basically, it's important to convince all the levels. We can use different kind of techniques. We have been providing training on unconscious bias, for example, but at the same time, is for the information that we collect in the financial inclusion market gap assessments, it's important to share at different levels. Usually, we actually use those results in a very eye-opening way. We don't present this as a report. IFC is not known for doing reports. So we basically have a very impactful presentation in which present data that is linked and is actually breaking the paradigms of risk the institutions may have. So you were thinking that they don't have access to jobs. They actually work. You think that they don't have education. They actually have education. You think that they don't have experience using financial services. Here it is, for example, Venezuelan, 73% of the population actually have access to financial services before they start moving into the neighboring countries. Ukrainians the same, etc., and Syrians, for instance, right? So that kind of information is important, but it's important to go from top down sometimes, and sometimes there are very good examples on bottom-up kind of approach. I've been working with champions, actually, or ambassadors internally in the institution that actually sensitize other staff in terms of how to serve, how good is serving, these populations. And I think Micol has a very good example from the work that you have been doing in Uganda, right? Comparing, the non-performing loans from local people versus the foreign-born residents, for example, it's actually not so much different. And in some cases, actually, they are paying much better because lack of access, as we learned, is actually what actually, made people to be more loyal. And that also happened when, we advocate for employability for forcibly-displaced populations. When I talk with companies, like a company that I spoke in Jordan, for example, and I say, what are exactly, the benefits for you to hire refugees? My turnover actually decreased, my productivity increases, my efficiency increases, and I have less complaints from my customers in regard to the quality of my products. So those are the kind of facts that we need to actually bring to indicate, companies, this is another opportunity for you to do business. So that would be my approach.
Thank you. I think
I'm really,
we're
really
gonna have to
sorry, but
stop.
we really need to stop now because we need you to be
Ready for the
fed
next one.
and with energy for the sessions in the afternoon. And there is going to be a session in this room from 1 o'clock to 3:45. So a very long session with 3 parts that is going to delve into several of the questions that were discussed here. But please go and get some food and continue the conversation after. Yeah.